Moment of silence for the victims and their families, please. Thank you very much. I speak to you this morning in an hour of anguish for our nation. Just before 9 p.m. last night, an American Airlines regional jet carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter carrying 3 military service members over the Potomac River in Washington, D.C., while on final approach to Reagan National Airport. Both aircraft crashed instantly and were immediately submerged into the icy waters of the Potomac. Real tragedy. The massive search and rescue mission was underway throughout the night, leveraging every asset at our disposal, and I have to say the local, state, federal, military, including the United States Coast Guard in particular, they've done a phenomenal job. So quick, so fast, it was mobilized immediately. The work has now shifted to a recovery mission. Sadly, there are no survivors. This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history, and a tragedy of terrible proportions. As one nation, we grieve for every precious soul that has been taken from us so suddenly, and we are a country of really, we are in mourning. This is really shaken a lot of people, including people, very sadly, from other nations who were on the flight. For the family members back in Wichita, Kansas, here in Washington, D.C., and throughout the United States and in Russia, we have a Russia contingent, some very talented people. Unfortunately, were on that plane. Very, very, very sorry about that. Whose loved ones were aboard the passenger jet. We can only begin to imagine the agony that you're all feeling. Nothing worse. On behalf of the First Lady, myself, and 340 million Americans, our hearts are shattered alongside yours, and our prayers are with you now and in the days to come. We'll be working very, very diligently in the days to come. We're here for you to wipe away the tears and to offer you our devotion, our love, and our support. There's great support. In moments like this, the differences between Americans fade to nothing compared to the bonds of affection and loyalty that unite us all, both as Americans and even as nations. We are one family, and today we are all heartbroken. We're all searching for answers. That icy, icy Potomac, it was a cold, cold night, cold water. We're all overcome with the grief for many who have so tragically perished, will no longer be with us. Together we take solace in the knowledge that their journey ended not in the cold waters of the Potomac, but in the warm embrace of a loving God. We do not know what led to this crash, but we have some very strong opinions and ideas, and I think we'll probably state those opinions now. Because over the years I've watched as things like this happen, and they say, well, we're always investigating, and then the investigation 3 years later, they announce it. We think we have some pretty good ideas, but we'll find out how this disaster occurred, and we'll ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. The FAA and the NTSB and the U.S. military will be carrying out a systematic and comprehensive investigation. Our new Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, his second day on the job when that happened. It's a rough one. We'll be working tirelessly. He's a great gentleman. The whole group these are great people, and they are working tirelessly to figure out exactly what happened. We will state certain opinions, however. I'm also immediately appointing an acting commissioner to the FAA, Christopher Rocheleau, a 22-year veteran of the agency, highly respected. Christopher, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We must have only the highest standards for those who work in our aviation system. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary. You remember that. Only the highest aptitude, they have to be the highest intellect and psychologically superior people were allowed to qualify for air traffic controllers. That was not so prior to getting there. When I arrived in 2016, I made that change very early on because I always felt this was a job that, and other jobs too, but this was a job that had to be superior intelligence, and we didn't really have that, and we had it. And then when I left office and Biden took over, he changed them back to lower than ever before. I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. And they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen, because this was the lowest level. Their policy was horrible, and their politics was even worse. So as you know, last week, long before the crash, I signed an executive order restoring our highest standards for air traffic controllers and other important jobs throughout the country. So it was very interesting. About a week ago, almost upon entering office, I signed something last week that was an executive order, very powerful, on restoring the highest standards of air traffic controllers and others, by the way. Then my administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation safety. We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent, the word talent. They have to be talented, naturally talented geniuses. You can't have regular people doing that job. They won't be able to do it. But we'll restore faith in American air travel. I'll have more to say about that. I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they want them, they can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so. This was in January 14th, so that was a week before I entered office. They put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program. Then another article, the Federal Aviation Administration, this was before I got to office, recently, second term. The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine? These are people that are, I mean, actually, their lives are shortened because of the stress that they have. Brilliant people have to be in those positions, and their lives are actually shortened, very substantially shortened, because of the stress, where you have many, many planes coming into one target, and you need a very special talent and a very special genius to be able to do it. Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. The FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify for the position of a controller of airplanes pouring into our country, pouring into a little spot, a little dot on the map, a little runway. The initiative is part of the FAA's Diversity and Inclusion Hiring Plan. Think of that. The initiative is part of the FAA's Diversity and Inclusion Hiring Plan, which says diversity is integral to achieving FAA's mission of ensuring safe and efficient travel. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's just the opposite. The FAA website shows that the agency's guidance on diversity hiring were last updated on March 23rd of 22. They wanted to make it even more so. And then I came in and I assume maybe this is the reason, the FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg, a real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run the Department of Transportation? He's a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground, and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bullshit. The Department of Transportation, his government agency charged with regulating civil aviation. Well, he runs it, 45,000 people, and he's run it right into the ground with his diversity. So I had to say that it's terrible. Then it's a group within the FAA, another story, determined that the workforce was too white, that they had concerted efforts to get the administration to change that and to change it immediately. This was in the Obama administration just prior to my getting there. And we took care of African Americans, Hispanic Americans. We took care of everybody at levels that nobody's ever seen before. It's one of the reasons I won. But they actually came out with a directive, too white. And we want the people that are competent. But now we mourn and we pray, and would like to ask all Americans to join me in a moment of silence as we ask God to watch over those who have lost their lives and bring comfort to the loved ones. And I just want to say God bless everyone in this room. This has been a terrible, very short period of time. We'll get to the bottom of it. So we all saw the same thing. We've seen it many times. I've had the honor of hearing tapes. Tapes are scary, very scary tapes. You had a airliner coming in, American Airlines. He was doing everything right. He was on track. He was the same track as everybody else. They came in. It's probably the same track as they've had for 25 years or more. He's coming in the path. And for some reason, you had a helicopter that was at the same height, obviously when they hit, but pretty much the same height, and going at an angle that was unbelievably bad. When the air traffic controller said, do you see, he was talking about, do you see him? But there was very little time left when that was stated. And then also, he said, follow him in. And then almost immediately after that, seconds after that, there was the crash that took place. Well, you follow him in, that means like everything's fine, follow him in. You had a pilot problem from the standpoint of the helicopter. I mean, because it was visual. It was a very clear night. It was cold, but clear, and clear as you could be. The American Airlines plane had lights blazing. They had all of their landing lights on. I could see it from the Kennedy Center tape. We had a tape up on the Kennedy Center. That seems to be the primary thus far. I'm sure we'll see other tapes because it's such an area where there are a lot of cameras looking up into the air, into space. So we'll probably see many other shots of it before too much time goes by. But we had a situation where you had a helicopter that had the ability to stop. I have helicopters. You can stop a helicopter very quickly. It had the ability to go up or down. It had the ability to turn. And the turn it made was not the correct turn, obviously. It did somewhat the opposite of what it was told. We don't know that that would have been the difference because the timing was so tight. It was so little. There was so little time to think. But what you did have is you had vision. The helicopter had vision of the plane because you had vision of it all the way, perfect vision of it all the way from at Kennedy Center where the tape was taken. And for some reason, there weren't adjustments made. Again, you could have slowed down the helicopter substantially. You could have stopped the helicopter. You could have gone up. You could have gone down. You could have gone straight up, straight down. You could have turned. You could have done a million different maneuvers. For some reason, it just kept going and then made a slight turn at the very end. And by that time, it was too late. They shouldn't have been at the same height because if it wasn't the same height, you could have gone under it or over it, and nobody realized, or they didn't say that it's at the same height. At the same height, it still wouldn't have been great, but you would have missed it by quite a bit. Could have been 1,000 feet higher. It could have been 200 feet lower. But it was exactly at the same height, and somebody should have been able to point that out. So all of this is going to be studied, but it just seems to me, from a couple of words that I like to use, the words common sense, some really bad things happened, and some things happened that shouldn't have happened. So you had a helicopter going in an identical direction. You had a helicopter that was at the exact same height as somebody going in essentially the opposite direction. You had a plane that was following a track, which is a track that every other plane followed. And I don't imagine, I know I've heard today that they might have been following the preceding plane, which was pretty close, but not that close, the preceding plane. But you wouldn't have even been able to see that because of the direction that the helicopter was coming in at. So you had a confluence of bad decisions that were made, and you have people that lost their lives, violently lost their lives. We're going to take a few questions. I'd like to ask our new Secretary of Transportation to say a few words. Sean Duffy, great gentleman, just started. It's not your fault, and I know you agree with me very strongly on intellect and even psychological well-being of the air traffic control. It's such an important position, and I think I can't emphasize stronger. I changed it when I first ran in 2016. I changed it. We had the highest standard that you could have, and then they changed it back. That was Biden, to a standard I read it to you. That was from one of your papers. One of the people in this room actually wrote that. And then I changed it back a few days ago. And unfortunately, that was, we'll see. We don't know that necessarily it's even the controller's fault. But one thing we do know, there was a lot of vision, and people should have been able to see that, you know, at what point do you stop? At what point do you say, wow, that plane's getting a little bit close? So this is a tragedy that should not have happened. Please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would just note the President's leadership has been remarkable during this crisis. We have had a whole of government response, local, state, federal, and when you see that kind of cooperation, it begins with the leadership in this body. So thank you for that, Mr. President. You make our jobs a lot easier. You made an important point that when we deal with safety, we can only accept the best and the brightest in positions of safety that impact the lives of our loved ones, our family members. And I think you make a really important point on that, Mr. President. That is the motto of your presidency, the best and the brightest, the most intelligent coming into these spaces. I want to take a moment and extend my condolences to the families of the loved ones. We commit to them that we are going to get to the bottom of this investigation, not in 3 years, not in 4 years, but as quickly as possible, with the NTSB, who is here today, as well as the FAA. What happened yesterday shouldn't have happened. It should not have happened. And when Americans take off in airplanes, they should expect to land at their destination. That didn't happen yesterday. That's not acceptable. And so we will not accept excuses. We will not accept passing the buck. We are going to take responsibility at the Department of Transportation and the FAA to make sure we have the reforms that have been dictated by President Trump in place to make sure that these mistakes do not happen again. And again, I want to thank you for your leadership, Mr. President, and I appreciate the confidence you placed in me. Thank you.
Pete, would you like to say something?
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Again, I want to echo what the Transportation Secretary said about your leadership. From the moment we found out about this, we were in contact with the White House trying to determine exactly what happened. I would echo it as well. No excuses. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We first and foremost, from the Defense Department, want to pass our condolences to the 64 souls and their families that were affected by this. Never should happen. and certainly the 3 service members, the 3 soldiers, a young captain, staff sergeant, and a CW2, Chief Warrant Officer, on a routine annual retraining of night flights on a standard corridor for a continuity of government mission. The military does dangerous things. It does routine things on the regular basis. Tragically, last night, a mistake was made. And I think the president is right. There was some sort of an elevation issue that we have immediately begun investigating at the DoD and Army level. Army CID is on the ground investigating. Top-tier aviation assets inside the DoD are investigating, sir, to get to the bottom of it so that it does not happen again, because it's absolutely unacceptable. But I want to echo what the Transportation Secretary and you, Mr. President, said, because it pertains to the DoD as well. We will have the best and brightest in every position possible. As you said in your inaugural, it is colorblind and merit-based. The best leaders possible, whether it's flying Black Hawks and flying airplanes, leading platoons, or in government. The era of DEI is gone at the Defense Department, and we need the best and brightest, whether it's in our air traffic control, or whether it's in our generals, or whether it's throughout government. So thank you for your leadership and courage on that, sir, and we'll stand by you on it. Thank you.
Very much. JD, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership. I just want to reemphasize something the President said, and you've heard from the Secretary of Transportation and of Defense. There really was a whole of government response. We were all on the phone. We were all communicating yesterday, trying to get to the bottom of this immediately, but also try to communicate with the American people about what happened. Something the President said that I think bears reemphasizing, which is that when you don't have the best standards in who you're hiring, it means, on the one hand, you're not getting the best people in government, but on the other hand, it puts stresses on the people who are already there. And I think that is a core part of what President Trump is going to bring and has already brought to Washington, D.C., is we want to hire the best people because we want the best people at air traffic control, and we want to make sure we have enough people at air traffic control who are actually competent to do the job. If you go back to just some of the headlines over the past 10 years, you have many hundreds of people suing the government because they would like to be air traffic controllers, but they were turned away because of the color of their skin. That policy ends under Donald Trump's leadership because safety is the first priority of our aviation industry. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, on DEI and the claims that you've made, are you saying this crash was somehow caused and the result of diversity hiring? And what evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been. We have a high standard. We've had a much higher standard than anybody else. And there are things where you have to go by brain power. You have to go by psychological quality. And psychological quality is a very important element of it. These are various very powerful tests that we put to use, and they were terminated by Biden. And Biden went by a standard that's the exact opposite. So we don't know, but we do know that you had 2 planes at the same level. You had a helicopter and a plane. That shouldn't have happened. And we'll see. We're going to look into that, and we're going to see. But certainly for an air traffic controller, we want the brightest, the smartest, the sharpest. We want somebody that's psychologically superior, and that's what we're going to have. Yeah.
Mr. President.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Mr. President, you mentioned at the top of the briefing that there were several Russian nationals on the flight.
Yes.
Will the U.S. government be willing to facilitate the transfer of their remains, considering
Yes, we
the
will.
fact there is no direct air travel between the 2 countries?
We've already been in contact with Russia, and the answer is yes, we will facilitate. Yes. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. The situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is getting worse, even though President John Lorenzo has been mediating the conflict between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo because he wants to bring peace and stability. The situation is really bad right now. I want to hear from Mr. President if you have any plan in the future to bring peace in the
Well,
Democratic
you're asking me a
Republic
question
of the
about
Congo.
Rwanda, and it is a very serious problem. I agree, but I don't think it's appropriate right now to talk about it, but it is a very serious problem.
We don't even yet know the names of the 67 people who were killed, and you are blaming Democrats and DEI policies and air traffic control and seemingly the member of the U.S. military who was flying that Black Hawk helicopter. Don't you think you're getting ahead of the investigation right now?
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think with the names of the people, you mean the names of the people that are on the plane? You think that's going to make a difference? They
it
are,
comfort their families
they are
during
a
blaming
group of
DEI
people that have
policies?
lost their lives. If you want a list of the names, we can give you that. We'll be giving that very soon. We're in coordination with American Airlines. We're in coordination very strongly, obviously, with the military. But I think that's not a very smart question.
Are you
I'm
blaming-
surprised coming from
Are
you.
you blaming your-
Please, please.
Thank you, President Trump. Thank you for being here. Based on your analysis so far, do you have a sense of who is at fault, if it was the plane, the helicopter, air traffic control, and can you assure people that it is safe to fly in and out of D.C.?
Well, I've given you the analysis, and the analysis was it was based on vision. You had a lot of people that saw what was happening. You had some people that knew what was happening. There was some warnings, but the warnings were given very, very late. You know, those warnings were given very late. It was almost as they were given. A few seconds later, there was the crash. It should have been brought up earlier. But the people in the helicopter should have seen where they were going. I can't imagine people with 20/20 vision not seeing, you know, what's happening up there. Again, they shouldn't have been at the same height. You're going in reverse directions or sideways directions. Obviously, you want to be at different heights. I see it all the time when I'm flying. You have planes going in the opposite. They're always lower. We're higher. So if somehow there's a screw up, there's not going to be a tragedy. It'll be close, but you know, there's never going to be a tragedy if you're at a different elevation. For whatever reason, they were at the same elevation. And also, from the American Airlines standard, he's along the track that every plane is along. You say, what was a helicopter doing in that track? It's very sad. But visually, somebody should have been able to see and taken that helicopter out of play. And they should have been at a different height.
Thank you, sir. You mentioned the Russians that were on board that plane. What other nationalities were on board that passenger?
There were a couple of others. We're going to be announcing it in about an hour. We have some very specific information. We're calling the countries. We've spoken to most of them, but there were some other countries represented.
Mr. President, have you spoken to President Putin?
I have not, no.
Mr. President, on your executive order,
Not about this.
on your executive order, you've already issued an executive order you say will restore aviation safety.
Right.
This crash happened after that. Was the executive order successful, and what more needs to change to keep people safe?
Well, you know, we issued it 3 days ago, and we're in the process of making those changes. This is something that should have been done a long time ago. Actually, my original order should have never been changed, and I think maybe you wouldn't have had this problem. Maybe. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. We see like everyday life that very often those diversity hires cause sometimes issues, as you just mentioned. So what plan do you have? Are we going to see some fire? Are you going to fire some of those diversity hires in the federal government? What plan do you have?
I would say the answer is yes. If we find that people aren't mentally competent, you see the language. The language is put out by them. And if you see that, I'm not going to bore you by reading it again, but these are not people that should be doing this particular job. They'd be very good for certain jobs, but not people that should be doing this particular job.
Mr. President, you have today blamed the diversity elements, but then told us that you weren't sure that the controllers made any mistakes. You then said perhaps the helicopter pilots were the ones who made the mistake.
It's all under investigation.
I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. We want brilliant people doing this. This is a major chess game at the highest level. When you have 60 planes coming in during a short period of time, and they're all coming in different directions, and you're dealing with very high-level computer work and very complex computers. And one of the other things I will tell you is that the systems that were built, I was going to rebuild the entire system, and then we had an election that didn't turn out the way it should have. But they didn't build the systems properly. They spent a lot of money renovating a system, spending much more money than they would have spent if they bought a new system for air traffic controllers, meaning the computerized systems. There are certain companies that do a very good job. They didn't use those companies. They used companies that should not have been doing it. No, I think it's very important to understand that for some jobs, and not only this, but air traffic controllers, they have to be at the highest level of genius. Okay.
I want to ask you about the ice skaters in a moment because the U.S. ice skating community was affected. But first, if I can, the cited FAA text that you read is real, but the implication that this policy is new or that it stems from efforts that began under President Biden or the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is demonstrably false. It's been on the FAA's website.
Who said that, you?
No, it's on the website, the FAA's website. It was there in 2013. It was there for the
Take
entirety.
a look. What I read.
It was there for the entirety of your administration,
Nice and easy.
too. So my question is, why didn't you change the policy during your first administration?
I did change it. I changed the Obama policy, and we had a very good policy. And then Biden came in, and he changed it. And then when I came in 2 days, 3 days ago, I signed a new order bringing it to the highest level of intelligence. Okay.
It was on the website.
Please.
Respectfully, it was on the website.
Quiet, quiet.
Thank you, Mr. Welcome back to the. I'm sorry. You mentioned that a vision was probably the problem that was at issue in this crash. There's been some reports that one of the pilots in the helicopter may have been using night vision equipment. Was there any?
I heard that. We don't know. We're going to know that pretty soon. It may change your view plane if you do have the night vision. So it's very possible that could have happened. That would be maybe a reason why you wouldn't actually see as well as on a clear night. You can see sometimes better without it. Have a couple of more.
Mr. President, is it helpful to have your Secretary of Transportation confirmed, and does this intensify your interest in getting other nominees confirmed quickly?
Turn it. Go to what?
Is it helpful to have your Secretary of Transportation confirmed, and does this intensify your interest in getting other nominees confirmed quickly as well?
Well, sure. We want fast confirmations, and the Democrats, as you know, are doing everything they can to delay them. They've taken too long. We're struggling to get very good people that everybody knows are going to be confirmed, but we're struggling to get them out faster. We want them out faster. It's a good question, actually. We've been pushing Sean. Everyone knows Sean for a long time. He got many, many Democrat votes, but they want to take as long as they can. They ask questions like some of the questions that Peter would ask that were totally irrelevant and not very good questions, but they want to just keep it going. They want to keep it going as long as possible. I was very honored, actually, that you got so many Democrat votes. That was really good. That was really good.
When I applied to meet with the families, and second question, is it your impression that military training was done during that time?
The what?
The training that the helicopter was involved in. Is it anything you can tell us about
You
that?
don't know. These are the things that will come up with the investigation. You don't know. But the helicopter obviously was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and a tragedy occurred. Please.
Question about
No, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You've been critical of the current regulations, and you've called for big reforms at FAA. I'm curious, sir.
Well, I made the reforms, actually.
What is your message?
3 days ago, I made the
Yes,
reforms.
sir. What is your message then to the American public in the weeks and months ahead? Should they feel hesitant to fly? And if you could clarify perhaps something that the Defense Secretary said when he said that this helicopter was on a continuity of government mission?
I don't know what that refers to, but they were practicing. They do that. They call it practicing, and they were, and that's something that should be done. It's only continuity in the sense that we want to have very good people, and that has to be in continuity, and that's what they refer to. But it was basically practice, and it was a practice that worked out very, very badly. Okay.
On his question, the first question, should people be hesitant to fly right now?
No, not at all. I've not hesitated to fly. This is something that it's been many years that something like this has happened, and the collision is just something that we don't expect ever to happen again. We are going to have the highest level people. We've already hired some of the people that you've already hired for that position long before we knew about this. I mean, long before. From the time I came in, we started going out and getting the best people because I said it's not appropriate what they're doing. I think it's a tremendous mistake. You know, They like to do things and they like to take them too far, and this is sometimes what ends up happening. Now, with that, I'm not blaming the controller. I'm saying there are things that you could question, like the height of the helicopter, the height of the plane being at the same level and going in opposite directions. It's not a positive. But no, we're already hiring people. No, flying is very safe. We have the safest flying anywhere in the world, and we'll keep it that way. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much, everybody.
Appreciate 大家好，欢迎来到我们的华尔街争议节目。今天我们将深入探讨一个引发广泛关注的议题 ：AI 新创公司 DeepSeek 是否真的偷窃了 OpenAI 的技术？前环球时报总编辑胡锡进向 DeepSeek 提问，该公司的回应却是让人意外的直率。他们认为在 AI 领域中，谁又不是站在前人的肩膀上呢？DeepSeek 用一个生动的比喻来形容这种指控，像是被班上的同学指责抄作业，然而他们强调自己的技术开发过程中投入了大量的努力与辛勤的实践，而并非单纯的抄袭。更有趣的是， DeepSeek 指出 OpenAI 的技术并未开源，质疑他们如何能偷技术。此外 ，OpenAI 指控 DeepSeek 使用了他们的知识蒸馏技术，但业内专家则认为这是一种普遍做法。问题在于 DeepSeek 是否违反了 OpenAI 的使用守则。这场争论不仅涉及技术的合法性，更深层次地反映了商业竞争与地缘政治的影响。所以，这场关于创新与知识共享的争议究竟会走向何方？请大家继续收看详细内容。在人工智慧的热潮中，技术创新的背后常常掀起一场场激烈的论战。近期 ，DeepSeek 这家 AI 新创公司卷入了一场风波，因为他们的模型被指控盗用了 OpenAI 的技术。据《星岛日报》的报道，这一事件引起了社会的广泛关注，而北京环球时报前总编辑胡锡进也在其微博上发声，针对此事向 DeepSeek 询问看法。DeepSeek 给出的回应既幽默又颇具哲理。做 AI 这行，谁不是站在巨人肩膀上啊？胡锡进在他的一篇微博文章中明示了美国官员们对 DeepSeek 的怀疑，称其可能偷了美国大模型的技术。他要求 DeepSeek 给予一个真实感受的回应，避开那些官方性的陈词滥调。DeepSeek 的回应如同一位面对诬陷的学生般坦诚，每次听到这种指控其实挺无奈的。就像班里突然有人指着你说作业是抄的，可你明明熬夜自己算的题，连草稿纸都攒了一抽屉。DeepSeek 进一步解释，他们的研发过程中所依赖的开源社区代码和学术论文中的公式，都是公共的知识财富。要说偷技术 ，OpenAI 的模型又没开源 ，GPT-4 的代码和训练数据连他们自己员工都不一定全知道，我们上哪儿偷去？他们的反驳直指当前 AI 技术共享的本质，强调这是一场基于全球智慧结晶的共同努力。至于 OpenAI 的指控涉及到的知识蒸馏技术，其实是业界常见的做法。据报道 ，OpenAI 已经向美国媒体确认，他们在 DeepSeek 的模型中发现了这类技术的使用痕迹。这种技术能够通过大型模型的输出来提升小型模型的效能，以较低成本达到特定任务的相似结果。OpenAI 的担忧在于 ，DeepSeek 可能利用这种技术训练自己的模型，从而引发了违反 OpenAI 使用守则的争议。然而，技术人员指出，知识蒸馏是许多公司都在进行的操作，并非 DeepSeek 一家独有。问题的关键在于，使用这种方法来构建自家竞争性模型是否违反了使用规范。DeepSeek 则认为，这些指控背后可能隐藏着商业竞争或地缘政治的影子，并强调用户用脚投票最真实，他们将专注于埋头做好产品。如此回应不仅展示了他们的立场，也反映出在 AI 领域中，技术伦理与竞争优势之间的微妙平衡。在这个数字化变革的时代，科技前沿的风向标似乎正悄然转移。春节期间，一则中国大模型 DeepSeek 的爆红消息引发了英伟达股价的震荡，仿佛一场科技界的地震。DeepSeek 的核心卖点是一句便宜又好用，这让投资者们不禁心生疑虑 ：AI 技术是不是不再需要巨额的芯片投入？英伟达的芯片销量会不会因此大打折扣？ 股市对于任何风吹草动都异常敏感，英伟达的股价自然也就跌跌不休了。更有趣的是，语数机器人也在春晚上大放异彩，身着花棉袄的机器人舞者吸引了无数目光。语数不仅仅是机器人制造商，还推出了市场竞争力颇高的机器狗，甚至在京东上以1到2万元的价格出售。科技产品的价格竞争力无疑是一大市场优势。尽管我不常重仓科技股，但近年来科技产品的进步实在让人印象深刻。就拿智能驾驶来说吧，这年头让车子自己跑已经不是科幻电影里的场景了。3月份的时候，我试驾了问界的智能驾驶功能，看着车子自动驾驶，我只需要坐在座位上，啥都不用干，那种震撼感就像发现新大陆一般。然而，问界的颜值让我有点犹豫，于是我尝试了理想 Mega。但彼时的理想自动驾驶技术上不成熟，许多路段仍需手动接管。不过，最近我朋友又让我体验了一次理想 Mega， 现在的它已经可以在全国范围内实现自动驾驶。长途旅行再也不是一份苦差事，自动驾驶让驾驶员在出游时90%的时间不用操心，让他自己开就行。此番体验让出行的疲劳指数骤降，仿佛能量被注满，旅行途中有更多精力享受沿途美景和自由时光。科技的魔力不仅限于驾驶，在语言障碍面前，沉浸式翻译简直是推开世界的墙。作为一个理财公众号的写手，我总是需要查阅外国资料，涵盖从美国到日本再到西班牙的各类信息。自从拥有了沉浸式翻译小插件，信息输入量迎来了爆炸式增长。最近我在日本雅虎上找到一篇关于遗产税的理财帖子，感谢沉浸式翻译，它将日文快速翻译成地道流畅的中文，仿佛语言的壁垒瞬间瓦解。尽管如此，对于某些科技，我仍保持警惕的态度。比如 AI 搜索，我偶尔会偷懒使用 Kimi 来查找资料，但总担心它可能整合了错误的信息源。因此，虽然它能迅速生成答案，我还是习惯通过参考来源进行复核。这种谨慎的态度在传统搜索中同样适用。无人配送技术的进步，则是我生活中目睹的另一大变化。有一天，我回到小区，看到美团的无人送货车在进行路线学习，这让我感到好奇。若这项技术成熟，外卖员将省去不少麻烦，送餐到小区门口便能节省时间，跑更多订单。对于小区内的配送任务，机器人或将提供新的解决方案，甚至提升单身女性客户的安全感。不过，这种高度自动化的趋势也令人担忧。若机器人抢走太多人类的工作机会，法律法规或许会介入调控。至于 AI 写作，我心里其实有点排斥，但又不得不承认，像 DeepSeek 这样的工具在写作方面的表现确实出众。在我让 DeepSeek 以春节生病为题材创作一首诗时，它立刻吟出春风不度病榻前，远山如梦隔云烟。纵有千杯邀明月，奈何身困似寒蝉。着实让我啧舌。AI 不仅能参与创作，还能为股票优化方案、理财建议，甚至健身计划提供详细建议。有人感慨 AI 可替代私教与心理咨询师，点评其股票基金配置更是直言不讳。我亲自测试了一番 ，AI 的回答确实超乎预期，令我不禁担忧，我也可能被淘汰了。而我心中最期待的科技，莫过于养老机器人了。当我老的腿脚不利索时，希望有个机器人能麻利地扶我起床，陪我去市场买菜，甚至监测健康指标，按时喂药。若生病时能背着我奔向医院，那就更完美了。展望未来，或许用不了20-30年，这种幻想终将成为现实。然而，在这场全球科技竞赛中，也不乏法律法规的挑战。意大利最近对 DeepSeek 的下架事件就是一例。意大利个人资料保护局要求 DeepSeek 提供数据使用信息，引发该应用在意大利 Google Play 和 App Store 的下架。该局对保护未成年用户和防止干预选举表示关注，并计划进行深入调查。这让人不禁想起2023年意大利曾因隐私权问题短暂禁止 ChatGPT。这场科技变革的风暴中，隐私安全与创新的博弈仍在继续。DeepSeek 在欧盟其他国家和英国上能正常使用，但在这个信息时代，数据使用的透明度显然是不可忽视的议题。正如我们迎接科技带来的便捷与惊喜时，也需谨慎应对其带来的挑战与深思。DeepSeek 与意大利的纠葛，仿佛提醒着我们，在这场科技竞赛中，法律与创新的关系始终如影随形。 欢迎大家进入六度探索的辩论环节。我们从正反两个角度对本节目进行辩论，请出我们的辩论高手楚天舒、谢琪琪。
我是楚天舒。
我是谢琪琪。
DeepSeek 所说的站在巨人肩膀上是一个不容忽视的事实。AI 技术的发展本身就是在前人的基础上进行创新和改进。从阿兰·图灵的智能机器构想到现今的深度学习模型，我们接收并利用了大量的公共知识，这是一种正常的科技进步模式。就像牛顿曾说的，如果说我看得更远，那是因为我站在巨人的肩膀上。在这样的背景下 ，OpenAI 如果指责 DeepSeek 窃取技术，应该提供更为具体和令人信服的证据，而非仅仅因为他们也使用了知识蒸馏技术。毕竟，根据业界常识，这是一种普遍使用的技术，不应被看作是专利或专有技术。
然而 ，DeepSeek 的辩解不能掩盖其可能侵犯知识产权的事实。OpenAI 的指控并非空穴来风，因为知识蒸馏这项技术尽管常见，但许多 AI 公司都有自己独特的实现方式和商业应用。DeepSeek 的快速崛起和其在市场上的高效能，是否是基于未经授权的技术借用？这是需要进一步调查的。不仅如此 ，AI 技术的发展中，知识产权的保护是至关重要的。否则，无序的模仿可能导致创新的减少，这对整体技术进步是不利的。DeepSeek 的行为如果是触犯了 OpenAI 的使用规则，那么面临的应该是法律上的审视，而非简单的商业竞争借口。
DeepSeek 的成功也给予了我们一个思考，在全球化的今天，技术界限变得模糊，彼此的学习和借鉴理应成为常态。特别是在 AI 这种高度依赖开源社区的领域，科技公司不可能孤立的发展。OpenAI 的 GPT 模型虽然未公开所有细节，但许多技术原理和思路是从公开的研究中得来的，这也是为什么 DeepSeek 可以通过使用知识蒸馏技术来提升自己的模型效能。对于这种技术普及的现象，应该鼓励而非限制，否则只会让技术垄断愈加严重，抑制创新者的发展空间。
但技术界限模糊不代表可以肆意越界。即便开源社区促进了技术的共享，但这并不意味着对于专有技术的侵扰是可以接受的。知识产权的保护是科技企业生存的基石。如若 DeepSeek 真的使用了 OpenAI 未授权的技术，这不仅仅是商业竞争的问题，而是法律和道德的双重挑战。过去，像三星与苹果之间的专利诉讼，已经告诉我们知识产权纠纷的严重性。如果 DeepSeek 希望在全球市场上立足，就必须尊重知识产权，否则将面临法律上的巨大风险和商誉损失。
技术共享和创新并不是矛盾的 ，DeepSeek 的案例正是创新激烈竞争中的一个典范。与其说是技术挪用，不如看成是技术的引入在创新，这正是科技行业进步的核心。从历史上看，许多科技突破都是在模仿和在创新之间取得平衡的。例如 Android 系统就是从苹果的 iOS 中吸取了灵感，继而成为全球最广泛使用的手机操作系统。DeepSeek 的成就是对全球科技市场的一次洗牌，逼迫其他企业加快创新步伐，这对消费者来说是有利的，因为他们将获得更好的产品和服务。
即便如此，技术再创新也必须在合法合规的框架内进行。DeepSeek 的情况提醒我们，在使用他人技术的同时，必须对其知识产权给予足够的尊重。无论是商业还是道德层面，技术的使用都应该是透明和受监管的。否则，这将对整个行业的创新环境造成破坏。就像过去的抄袭事件在文学界和音乐界引发的争议一样，我们不能因为技术的普及而对知识产权的侵害视而不见。DeepSeek 的未来在于其如何处理此事，而不是简单的否认和辩解。只有在符合法律规范的基础上进行创新，才能真正赢得市场和用户的尊重。
我是评委合理，我想对两位精彩的辩论做出评论。楚天舒与谢琪琪的辩论展现了当前科技界在知识产权与技术创新之间的尖锐矛盾，而双方的观点也各有其合理性。楚天舒强调了技术进步的普遍性， 认为站在巨人肩膀上是科技发展的常态。他提到 AI 技术的演进依赖于前人的研究成果，这是创新过程中不可或缺的元素。他以历史上的例子来说明，许多科技突破都是在模仿和在创新之间取得的平衡。这一观点无疑给出了关于技术共享必要性的有力支持。然而，谢奇奇则从法律与道德的层面提出了对 DeepSeek 的质疑。他强调知识产权的重要性，警告若无法妥善处理知识产权问题，将会导致整个行业的创新环境恶化。他的论点提醒我们，即便技术普及是大势所趋，但这并不意味着侵犯知识产权的行为可以被容忍。这场辩论的根本在于商业竞争与道德法律之间的张力。楚天舒的观点强调了技术的开放性，认为在全球化的背景下，技术的模糊界限是促进创新的动力。然而，谢奇奇的观点则坚持，这种模糊不应成为侵权的借口，否则将严重影响科技企业的生态系统。我们不应忽视，科技的进步在于创新，但创新必须在法律规范的框架内进行，才能获得持久的尊重与发展。DeepSeek 的成功与否，除了技术的优势外，更在于其如何面对知识产权的挑战。若未来的技术发展能够在尊重知识产权的基础上进行，这将成为一个良性的循环，促进整个行业的繁荣。总结来说，本次辩论提供了深入的思考，让我们反思在技术快速发展的背景下，如何平衡创新与知识产权的保护。楚天舒与谢奇奇各自的立场都对当前科技界面临的现实问题提出了有益的见解，值得我们在未来对话中继续探讨。
谢谢大家收看六度探索。这是一个由科学家、经济学家、媒体人、工程技术人员合作建立的新型媒体，网友与六度 AI 参与合作完成各种内容，这些内容不能作为任何决策或法律的意见。这是一个新型的试验性媒体方式，我们希望得到大家的支持，修正错误。网友可以参与讨论，也可以向万能的六博士提出你能想出的任何问题。
观众朋友们好，欢迎大家来到本期的经济学究以及思想先驱报的现场。最近呢，大家讨论的最热烈的就是有关于 DeepSeek 的突破。结果啊，在这个春节前啊，大年30这一天，阿里云突然是宣布，新一代的大模型 Q1 2.5 Max 啊，已经呢是超过了全球的顶级模型。那么整个股市的反应可以说是相当的迅速啊，美股阿里的股价在收盘前是一下子拉升啊，将近7%。那么到底如何看待 Q1 2.5 Max 的发布呢？有人说原来这个大模型领域是美国企业和美国企业之间 PK， 结果DeepSeek 一出，发现不是美国企业和美国企业 PK， 也不是中国和美国企业 PK， 而是土生土长的中国软件工程师和在美国被培训的软件工程师在 PK， 并且呢是放出了这个 DeepSeek 团队的照片以及 OpenAI 团队的照片，我们看到很多不少华裔面孔结果现在阿里通义千问团队发表了这样的一个声明，结果人家说不是中国和美国，也不是中国人和中国人自己卷，而是杭州的2家地方企业在卷也讲到了现在杭州作为中国在上海附近的这样一个城市，似乎原来是以电商闻名，现在呢已经是更广阔不仅仅的是 AI， 我们之前为大家介绍到的这个冯骥的这个黑神话悟空这样一款游戏，它的 studio 也是在杭州。那么到底这个技术突破是什么样的？其实我们之前为大家介绍到这个阿里的这一款最新模型也是采用的混合专家的架构。那么预训练的数据大概是20万亿左右那么在整个这个行业基准测试中，看到基本是和国际模型领先，甚至呢还要是这个更加突破一步。 现在有人说啊，说这个阿里呢，可能也有模型本身突破之外的其他的进意。我们看到阿里云的这个百链平台啊，也开放了这个完整的 AI 工具链。那么这样的一种一体化架构，就更类似于这个亚马逊的这个 AWS。这样的我们叫做云计算服务商的一个模式啊，不仅仅是有超算集群，同时呢还有云原生的架构，还有就是开源生态啊。那么未来到底会对整个 AI 领域有什么样的影响呢？我们今天特别关注到的是摩根士坦利的一份研报啊，其中特别讲到中国 AI 资产的重估啊，这个时刻可能已经到了。那么 AI 技术啊，现在已经是打响了一场从中国为中心的无声战役啊。那么如果是看到摩根士坦利的研报啊，短期之内大型的科技公司如果呢是采用现在这样的一种技术路线，那么可能短期之内对于 AI 的训练需求会有下降。但是什么呢？模型成本一低了，对于推理需求增长就增加了。所以我们之前也为大家讲到所谓的这个杰文斯悖论，现在对于英伟达的需求其实是比较复杂的一个过程不是大家简单想的这个市场血洗18%接下来整个 AI 泡沫破裂，不是这样简单化的一个结论。那么对于中国来讲其实对于中国的数据中心也有影响，特别是一线城市的数据中心。那么很多的科技公司如果是采用了类似的这样的一个这个我们叫做低成本模型的代配方式的话，那么对于一线城市数据中心市场恐怕在短期之内就会有提升另外我们也注意到 AI 模型的成本一下降，应用的门槛也下降了，所以整个的这个智能化应用可能也会更加普及。那未来中国的软件APP 等等等等，也会有可能迎来一个 AI 的春天。那么现在大家更重要的一个这个我们叫做问题或者是犹豫，或者呢是猜想，就是是不是整个中国的这个 AI 生态系统，其实它的这个级别以及进化程度已经远远超过了我们之前的想象。那我们看到美股因为 AI 的整体增值已经是超过10万亿美元了。那么接下来中国 AI 资产的重估是不是也到了？我们特别看到摩根士坦利的这样的一个报告中指出了这样的一个现象那么和平先生到底是如何看待这个问题的？今天呢，我们也特别请和平先生来谈一谈。
谢谢李奇博士不过我做这个回应的时候已经是在李奇博士提出问题之后，已经是过去了10几个小时。那么我现在这个做回应的时间是美国的东部时间凌晨2、3点钟了2、3点钟。那我为什么推迟这么晚在做呢？你要讲一个理由吧，有2点。一个理由呢就是因为今天的新闻非常之多一件接着来。那么作为新闻人有新闻就是非常的紧张一是要追，一是要了解那么所以推的这么晚。当然还有另外一个原因，我就希望美国的媒体或者西方的媒体或者是专业人士对阿里巴巴所推出的这个语音模型有一个评价。但是很可惜到现在为止都没有这样的一些专业报道出来，甚至很少看到报道。我也不知道是什么原因，是因为这个系统还没有正式推出来让媒体人知道，还是说呢美国的媒体根本就没有注意到这回事现在我们作为媒体人作为这个使用者是没有办法做出非常专业的这个评判，说阿里巴巴是不是比深度探索更厉害，还是说这是阿里巴巴的一个吹牛。但是我也讲的是，如果阿里巴巴这么短的时间之内就宣布超过了这个深度探索，有没有这种可能性呢？我认为这种可能性是存在的，也许不是阿里巴巴或者是腾讯，或者是其他的这个百度等等等等。我为什么说有这种可能性呢？ 甚至我认为过一段时间，美国比如说 OpenAI 比如说谷歌比如说脸书，他们推出的语言模型呢，比现在这个深度探索还要好，我也是相信的，因为现在的这个市场大家是互相在争相推出这个优秀的产品。美国有强大的资金支撑，美国有自由的一个人才流动的这么一个环境人才非常之多，虽然里面很多是华裔的这种研究者，但是它还有其他族裔的全球化的这个研究者在这个里面移民到美国或者留下来美国所以美国的人才储备也很充分，资金也很充分而且呢，一是有这样的研究的很专业的背景，所以呢，它能够产生新的语言模型，我觉得也是可能的。中国呢，在这个人工智能的人才培训已经是相当的系统，而且经过了一定的时间。第二个是中国的这些企业资金也不缺乏，虽然他们估值远远没有这个中国那么高，但是呢，他们自己本身的这个资金来进行研究研发的资金是有的，而且呢，这个中国的工程师非常之多从这次深度探索就可以看出来，没有留学的这么一个团队照样可以做出这个产品。而中国的其他的团队不但有自己的本土的力量，也有这个留学归来的人，所以中国的竞争优势也是非常的这个强大。那这种谁会取得胜利，我们现在很难做出一个结论，也许是今天你取得胜利，明天我取得胜利然后不断的在这样一个比赛也好，竞争也好这样一个互相成长的过程也好，让这个人工智能的这个进化速度来得会更快来得会更快。所以我恰恰所期待的一个局面将会出现不是说有了一个 OpenAI 它就独霸天下，实际上在美国也出现了很多相应的这个大同小异有不同改变的这种大型语言模型出来也有了中国也是一样估计一段时间也推出来了。那中国的这个推出来的一个力量就是中国的对市场的热情，或者是中国自己本身的市场已经非常非常之大，而且它虽然可能跟西方未必能够完全对接起来，但是呢，它在很多的地区它的影响力是非常之大的。所以中国的这个市场也不只是局限于中国大陆自己本身的这个市场而且中国的整个的工业化的发展，它是个系统性的一种崛起，是个整体性的崛起所以它的背景所支撑的力量很强，不是这家公司就是那一家公司的崛起。你看看最近这几年中国在很多的领域里面，包括传统的互联网包括后来的应用城市，中国都发展的并不比美国差，甚至在某些应用城市来讲已经超过了这个美国所以这种趋势我觉得会继续下去。好了，谢谢我们的观众，再见。
欢迎来到六度解析新闻背后的多维思考，带你洞悉头条背后的世界。在今日华尔街频道的六度解析中，我们将深入探究时事热点，为你揭开新闻背后的真相。在这个信息泛滥、真相难觅的时代，六度解析应运而生。我运用海量数据、人工智能整合以及专家观点，层层剥析每个故事。通过实时背景数据挖掘，确保你获得全面的新闻资讯。然而， 我们关注的不仅仅是数据，更重要的是将它们串联起来。我将分析多方视角，揭示隐藏的脉络，为你提供单一媒体常常忽略的背景信息。无论是政治、经济，还是全球事务，我都将为你带来最具洞察力的分析。试想一下，拥有洞悉全局的能力，做出明智的决策，参与有意义的讨论，这就是6度解析带给你的价值。它不仅仅是新闻分析，更是一种赋能的工具。加入今日华尔街的6度解析，共同探索头条背后的故事。你通往深度理解的旅程，从这里开始。不要只是阅读新闻，要解码新闻，理解新闻，活出新闻。这一切尽在6度解析。立即订阅，不错过任何真知灼见，因为了解真相仅仅是个开始。
想成为全球沟通达人吗？6度人工智能语音克隆技术帮你实现梦想。在这个新时代，语言障碍已成过去。我们隆重推出6度人工智能语音克隆系统，这项由欧美亚顶尖专家研发的突破性技术，让你可以克隆自己的声音，并将文字转换成145种语言和方言，提升你的个人和职业生活。想象一下，你可以在日本参加商务会议，在巴西上课，或与意大利的朋友畅聊，而这一切都用你自己的声音、他们的语言进行。操作简单，只需点击几下，无需复杂的科技知识，就能享受无缝衔接的体验，让世界向你敞开。从商务到教育，从媒体到娱乐，应用场景无处不在。企业可以更好地与全球客户建立联系。教育机构可以提供多语言学习，媒体可以创作更丰富的内容，触达更广泛的受众。今天就来体验这项革命性技术吧！访问迈向你的生